Can you tell us what Queen is all about?
It's basically a rock and roll band with lots of harmonies, lots of everything.
Freddie Mercury, the legendary frontman of Queen, is remembered as one of the greatest showmen in rock history, a man whose voice could span 4 octaves and whose performances turned stadiums into cathedrals of music. On stage, he appeared larger than life, commanding audiences with dazzling charisma, flamboyant outfits, and a voice that could shift from operatic to thunderous rock in a single breath. To the world, Freddie seemed untouchable, a figure of pure joy and artistic brilliance. But behind the glitter, the bravado and the iconic mustache was a man with very strong opinions, and not all of them were flattering. For as much as Freddie admired the greats of music, he was also unafraid to express his disdain for certain artists who rubbed him the wrong way. Some he felt lacked originality. Others he thought relied too heavily on image rather than talent. And a few simply clashed with his personal philosophy of what music should truly be about. While Freddie was known for his playful sense of humor and cheeky charm, when it came to music, he took things deadly seriously. He believed artistry had to come from the soul, not from formulas or gimmicks. And when fellow musicians failed to live up to that standard, Freddie didn't hold back his feelings. Today, we dive into the surprising list of 5 musicians Freddie Mercury openly admitted he couldn't stand. The ones he thought were overrated, uninspired, or simply undeserving of the spotlight. And as you'll soon see, Freddie's sharp tongue and uncompromising standards spared no one. In the late 1970s, London's music scene was divided. On one side stood Queen, a band of polished musicianship, grand theatrics, and a frontman who embodied flamboyant extravagance. On the other was the raw, chaotic force of punk rock, personified by the Sex Pistols and their infamous bassist, Sid Vicious. It didn't take long for these two worlds to collide, and when they did, sparks flew. Freddie Mercury had little patience for punk's deliberate rejection of musicianship. He respected rebellion when it came from authenticity, but he saw Sid Vicious and the Pistols as trying too hard to shock rather than create lasting art. Freddie was classically trained, meticulous in the studio, and passionate about crafting songs that blended rock, opera, and theatricality. To him, punk's anyone-can-do-it philosophy wasn't liberation. It was laziness. The tension between Queen and the Sex Pistols boiled over one night in 1977 at Wessex Studios, where both bands were recording. According to those present, Sid Vicious barged into Queen's space and sneered at Freddie, mocking him with the nickname Freddie Platinum, a jab at Queen's glossy, extravagant style compared to punk's stripped-down grit. Without missing a beat, Freddie looked him straight in the eye and fired back. "Aren't you Simon Ferocious? What are you going to do about it?" That sharp-cutting reply silenced Sid and perfectly summed up Freddie's attitude. He wasn't intimidated by punk's posturing. To Freddie, Sid Vicious wasn't a threat. But a clown, someone more interested in causing chaos than making meaningful music. In interviews, Freddie later described punk rock as the new fashion, and admitted he had no respect for artists who couldn't play their instruments properly or who leaned on image over substance. While punk fans saw Sid as a symbol of rebellion, Freddie saw him as the embodiment of empty bravado. Yet this wasn't just a clash of personalities. It represented a deeper cultural divide. Freddie believed music should elevate and inspire, while Sid and his peers thrived on tearing things down. To Freddie, that wasn't artistry. It was destruction for its own sake. Looking back, the feud between Freddie Mercury and Sid Vicious remains one of rock's most fascinating clashes, a flamboyant showman who built entire worlds through music against a punk figure who thrived on tearing down the old order. And in Freddie's eyes, there was no contest. Sid Vicious was not just a musician he disliked. He was an insult to everything Freddie believed music should be. Freddie Mercury often wore his influences proudly, from the operatic power of Montserrat Caballé to the rock swagger of Jimi Hendrix. Yet one name you might expect him to admire was surprisingly one he held a more complicated and often critical view of: Elvis Presley. For millions of fans worldwide, Elvis was the king of rock and roll. He revolutionized popular music, inspired generations of performers, and built an empire of fame that lasted beyond his lifetime. But to Freddie, Elvis represented a figure who became trapped in his own image, a cautionary tale of what happens when music becomes more about persona than artistic growth. Freddie respected Elvis's early work, especially the raw energy of the 1950s rockabilly tracks that shook the world. But as Elvis's career shifted into movies, Las Vegas residencies, and a reliance on safe, formulaic ballads, Freddie grew frustrated. He once commented that Elvis had stopped evolving musically, settling instead into a comfortable routine that played into the public's expectations rather than challenging them. To Freddie, stagnation was the death of artistry. Queen constantly reinvented themselves, from the operatic Bohemian Rhapsody to the disco-inspired Another One Bites the Dust, while Elvis, in Freddie's eyes, had abandoned risk for security. He became the product, Freddie reportedly said, not the music. Another sticking point for Freddie was the way Elvis embodied a hypermasculine stage persona. With his curled lip, pelvis thrusts, and leather-clad bravado, Elvis represented a style of performance that Freddie thought lacked depth. Freddie's own flamboyant stagecraft, with costumes that blurred gender norms and challenged expectations, was in many ways a direct rebellion against the kind of rigid masculinity Elvis had made famous. Still, Freddie's critique wasn't just personal taste. It reflected his broader philosophy on what it meant to be a true artist. To Freddie, music wasn't about preserving an image. It was about constant reinvention, pushing boundaries, and surprising audiences. Elvis, in Freddie's view, had become trapped by his crown as the king, unable or unwilling to break free from the expectations that title demanded. And yet, there was a strange irony. Despite his criticisms, Freddie occasionally performed Elvis songs in private, even singing "It's Now or Never" to friends. It wasn't that he hated Elvis entirely, it was that he hated what Elvis symbolized, the danger of letting fame consume artistry. For Freddie, who lived life as both a superstar and an innovator, Elvis's decline was a tragedy. But it was also a warning. It taught him what not to do, and perhaps pushed him even harder to ensure Queen never became predictable. So while fans across the globe crowned Elvis Presley as the eternal king, Freddie Mercury quietly saw him as one of the musicians he had the least respect for. Not because Elvis lacked talent, but because, in Freddie's mind, he wasted on the surface. Freddie Mercury and David Bowie seemed like kindred spirits. Both were flamboyant, both blurred gender boundaries, and both reinvented themselves with fearless creativity. Their legendary collaboration on Under Pressure remains one of the most iconic duets in rock history. But behind the music, Freddie and Bowie had a notoriously volatile relationship, one that revealed deep artistic clashes and left Freddie with mixed, often bitter, feelings toward the Thin White Duke. When Bowie first rose to fame in the early 1970s with his Ziggy Stardust persona, many expected Freddie to admire him. But in private, Freddie criticized Bowie's theatrical style as being too contrived. Freddie's flamboyance was rooted in exaggerating his real personality, while he believed Bowie's characters were carefully constructed masks, more performance art than true vulnerability. "He hides behind personas," Freddie reportedly said, "whereas I give you me." Their tension boiled over during the recording of Under Pressure in Montreux in 1981. What began as an exciting jam session quickly turned into a battle of egos. Bowie insisted on controlling the vocal arrangement, the phrasing, and even aspects of the production. Freddie, who was used to steering Queen's creative process, bristled at Bowie's domineering approach. The result was a tense atmosphere in the studio, with both men competing to outshine the other. The song's brilliance is undeniable, but so is the friction that birthed it. Freddie later admitted that Bowie's work ethic impressed him, but he also felt Bowie lacked warmth. Where Freddie thrived on playfulness, camaraderie, and connecting with fans, Bowie often maintained a detached, intellectual approach that Freddie found cold. To him, Bowie was brilliant but joyless, too concerned with appearing avant-garde rather than simply making music people could feel in their bones. Another source of Freddie's criticism was Bowie's shifting identity. while fans marveled at his ability to reinvent himself, from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke to his Berlin experimental era. Freddie often dismissed it as calculated reinvention rather than genuine evolution. Freddie's philosophy was that music had to come from the heart, not from an image strategy. Despite these criticisms, Freddie did respect Bowie's artistry on some level. Their chemistry on Under Pressure proved that when their worlds collided, magic could happen. But the experience also convinced Freddie that Bowie was not someone he could ever truly align with. To Freddie, Bowie was a rival more than a collaborator, someone he admired in parts, but fundamentally disliked as a person to work with. Their clash symbolized more than just two strong personalities. It was the collision of two very different visions of artistry. Bowie, the chameleon intellectual who crafted personas,